So in Castle Crashers, you fight your way through a burning village, camp in the tall grass fields and storm an industrial castle. You arrive at the obligatory desert level and you stumble upon a new tool, a shovel, and you can now dig anywhere you want. A few seconds later, you notice a little X mark on the ground, so naturally you go over it and start digging, and this time you're rewarded with an item. That is pretty cool, but what is mind-blowing is that in that moment you realize that you've seen those X marks before. And now you're wondering what kind of goodies were buried under your nose this entire time. So it's time to go back to those levels and experience something I call recontextualization. This video was sponsored by World of Warships, the strategic team-based sea battle game available for PC. There are 44 million players controlling 400 historical ships over 40 different maps in this game, which is pretty much the go-to game if you're into anything related to battleships, aircraft carriers, or cruisers. And the developers are apparently releasing new content every single month. Oh, also, when it comes to playstyles, you can play as a lone wolf or make a division with your friends by getting the game through the link in the description. And you know how these things go. If you use the promo code FIRE, you'll get a bunch of free goodies like 200 doubloons plus 1 million credits, as well as the premium battleship USS Texas, 20 Restless Fire camouflage, and a week of premium account status. So thank you very much World of Warships for partially funding this video. Go show your appreciation by downloading the game from the link in the description. Now, back to our video. Years after we finish a game, we only remember certain highlights from that gameplay experience, like catching the boat in Prince of Persia, your first knife kill in this game, and how bullshit that race was in Mafia 1. Those weren't necessarily good memories. However, when the context changes in a game and it allows you to experience a previous section from a new perspective, that's pretty much guaranteed to be remembered as a highlight. It's the moment when you learn a piece of information that makes you go, wait, I could have done that this whole time? At that moment, it feels like the game opens up and your curiosity is ignited, which is a very powerful moment we associate with what we call good games. However, pulling that off in your game is not exactly easy, so let me try to define this thing I call recontextualization. It's the immediate introduction of a mechanic or piece of information that enables the player to experience already existing content in a new way. In other words, it's a way of breathing new life into previously explored content, and that is an important part. It has to be content that was already there. So sprinkling new enemies in an old area does not count. I mean, sure, it brings some value to that area, but it doesn't have the same emotional impact as recontextualization done properly. And in my process of researching this neat little design trick, I noticed that it comes in two flavors. So let's take a look at some actual game examples in order to get a better idea of how this works. The mechanical type of recontextualization implies that the player can only experience it once the game allows them to. This usually takes the form of unlocking an ability or receiving an item that allows the player to interact with previous content in a new way. Basically, it's a mechanical switch that the designer decides when to flip. At its core, it's the kind of design philosophy behind most Metroidvania games. You stumble upon an item that grants you an ability you can use to overcome an obstacle somewhere else in the game. A better example of this is the shovel from Castle Crashers mentioned earlier. At the point when you unlock the shovel, you're already roughly halfway through the entire game, and at that point you've seen almost a dozen X's on the ground in previous levels. So in this case, the implementation works flawlessly because the game allows you to move between levels whenever you want, encouraging you to act upon that curiosity of yours. Another interesting approach to changing context mechanically is character creation. Different characters with different abilities would allow you to approach content differently. Let's say, for example, there's a game in which you can invest points in various skill trees, go all out on hostile abilities, and you can take down any group of enemies. However, if you invest those points in strength, you can move this heavy vending machine to reveal a vent that allows you to bypass that group of enemies in the exact same level. Same content, approached in a different context.
Adam, what's happening? What's your situation? Adam!
It seems that a lot of games use this design tool to mess with navigation. Getting a new disguise outfit in Hitman allows you to navigate previously hostile areas. Or in Dead Cells, you'll find these green blobs around that you can tickle. And after you play some more, you'll stumble upon a rune that allows you to transform those green blobs into vines. You can now climb into areas that were previously unreachable. And while these mechanical examples are great, there is that second flavor I mentioned that I think is even better. The knowledge type of recontextualization is the kind that happens directly in the player's mind, and because of that, I think this has an even bigger emotional impact on the experience. It's also significantly more difficult to design as a result of that. Where before you had to wait for the game to mechanically unlock something for you, now you don't have to wait at all. It's something the player can do at any time as long as they know they can. It's all about the knowledge in your brain and what you know. So take Tokitori 2 for example. In this lovely puzzle game, you have to manipulate the creatures around you in order to navigate the levels and solve puzzles. And you do that with your abilities that you already have available from the very beginning of the game. You don't need to unlock any skills. So as you start the first level, you go to the right and you use your stomp ability to break this platform. Shortly after, you learn that you can feed these little purple creatures to the blue frog, and if you stomp next to it, it's going to burp a bubble that carries you upwards. Oh, and your other ability is a little chirp that can move platforms and lure birds to your location. So now, with the knowledge of how to interact with these creatures, you start the game again. However, this time, instead of breaking that platform, you realize that there's a bird there that you can lure over by chirping. So you try that and it picks up this purple creature that was conveniently placed there, and now you can feed it to the frog. So with one more stomp, you have just discovered a completely new area. This is the beauty of knowledge-based recontextualization. Those rules and creatures, the content was always there this entire time, but you simply lacked the knowledge of interacting with them in this new way. In Hollow Knight, you run into this spike gap that's so big it's seemingly impossible to jump over, unless you know that you can pogo off of spikes by swinging your sword downwards. And as a result, you're treated with a little reward. As soon as you learn that, you start asking yourself if there are any other spike gaps that you could pogo over anywhere else in the game. And that thought right there makes any game feel way bigger than it actually is. However, it's very difficult to fully commit your game's core design to this concept, and as a result, there are extremely few games that truly embrace knowledge-based recontextualization. The Witness being one of the very few games where you start off by solving line-based puzzles, and as you progress, they become gradually more difficult. But also, after you're exposed to them for a while, you'll slowly start noticing them within the environment itself all around you. And that is a great example of this design choice being used to reinforce the core idea of the game itself, both mechanically but also thematically. Another equally rare example I can think of is Outer Wilds, where this concept is integrated so deeply into the game's design that I cannot even talk about it without spoiling parts of it. I am working on a separate video on how Outer Wilds did that exactly by having a chat with its designer to get a better perspective on it, so make sure to stay subscribed for that. But regardless if you prefer the mechanical or the knowledge type, we should talk about some worries when it comes to adding these concepts into your game. The obvious measurable benefit of this design concept is the ability to breathe in new life into already consumed content. And obviously, this seems to work for a certain type of non-linear games. It seems that one requirement for this to work is the player's ability to go back to previous levels, be it through a level selection screen or through more seamless ways. And as a designer myself, I understand the reluctance you might have against this. I mean, if the players could break a sequence by executing some specific actions, that means that unaware players might stumble upon that by mistake. And yeah, that's true, but statistically, that's not something you should worry about, because even if that happens, I wouldn't exactly call it a negative experience.
Oh, I should not be here. I should not be here. My ship is 33 kilometers away now. What the fuck?
If you don't want to fully commit to this design philosophy within your game, then you can implement a lightweight version of recontextualization, which is the popular practice of adding small hidden rooms in your levels with little rewards in them. You know, the wall chicken in Castlevania if you know where to attack, or the little hidden spots in Loco Roco that are usually nicely telegraphed through the level design. It's also the moment in Gone Home when you find out that there are secret panels hidden in the house walls. Same thing goes for illusionary walls in Souls games, except the ones that take 50 hits to discover, because those ones. You also don't have to strictly stick to mechanical or knowledge-based recontextualization, but instead you can embrace both, like Valheim did, which also happens to be my favorite example of this concept. In the game, you usually start off in the meadows, and as you make progress, you work your way through other biomes like forest, mountains, swamp, and so on. Usually, games that use this progression path don't really give you a reason to go back to a previous biome after you've moved away from it, effectively making it into dead content. However, in Valheim, you stumble upon an item called the Wishbone later in the game, and when you equip this item, your character starts pulsing whenever you're close to a secret. And it turns out there are secrets buried in the ground everywhere, and they are different based on each biome, giving you a reason to go back and experience old content from a new perspective. This is a great implementation because it's both a mechanical switch by unlocking the item, but also a knowledge one if you know what to look for. You can find those secrets by paying attention to subtle hints and landmarks without really needing the item to begin with. So I think this is a super powerful design practice that adds a lot of value to previously explored content. And if you've experienced this before in a game, please let me know how that went down in the comments, since I'm always on the lookout to gather more examples. Oh, and in the spirit of having a little fun with this concept, if you take every game shown on screen when I said the word recontextualization in this video, and you fill in the first letter of those game names in this link, you'll get access to my personal best burger recipe. So good luck.